at the front, and then we'll pass back to
Thank you. My name is Sebastian Beck. I'm originally French. I really appreciated the emphasis on the potential leadership by France, and I hope that our political leaders will hear this call. To link this with the last remark on the CBRLC, I was wondering if you could perhaps explain what your hopes will be from not just the French presidency, but the French presidency working together with Peru, if they are the ones to host the previous COP, and how this play with these new ideas, for instance, of developing countries, they use brackets, from Latin America, they try to really bridge the divide between North and South. For instance, to come and saying that they understand they have some capacity, and they are ready to play a role, but it's not just based on this very formal division between the two regional units. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. De Boer.
Well, thank you for three very interesting points. Let me start with the last one. The last one first. I once made the mistake of going back and looking again at the video recordings of the final plenary of the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference. But in looking at that video, something that struck me, that also struck me at the time, is that in that disruptive plenary where the lady from Venezuela was holding up her pleading hand saying, when the people of the world want to get the floor, you'll remember that that all of the initial objections to the Copenhagen Accord were not on the content, but were on the process. They were about the process, the lack of transparency in the process by which the Copenhagen Accord had come about, the lack of communication between the group that created that accord and the rest of the people there, and the way it was presented by the Danish Prime Minister as basically a take it or leave it proposition. So probably one of the most important things for a French presidency will be to focus on the quality of the process, to ensure that there is transparency in the process. And many of the people that declared the UN climate process dead after Copenhagen said, how can you possibly reach an agreement with 197 countries at the table and 40,000 people in the conference center? Fair point. But what people I think tend to forget is that that at every single climate change conference there is always a small group of countries, about 35 to 40 countries, that broker the final deal in consultation with the rest of those present. And that's what I meant in my remarks about not needing to have everyone at the table. The important thing to remember is that at every one of those climate change conferences where a small group brokered the deal, that small group was designated by the large constituency of countries present. So the group of 77 of China got 25 seats at the table, the Europeans got 9, and then those groups went back and decided who should represent them at that smaller table on what topic. So it was a democracy that was created within democracy. The big difference in Copenhagen was that the small group that brokered the Copenhagen Accord was not created in that way. The group in Copenhagen was handpicked by the presidency of the Copenhagen Conference, and as a result, the larger constituency did not feel that that small group brokering the deal was representing them, and that small group failed to communicate with the larger constituency that was out there and whose views they were supposed to be representing. So the most, in a process which is supposed to be all about content and science, actually my strongest recommendation would be on process and on transparency. transparency, to manage the process well in a transparent manner. And that can still mean that you have a small group, providing that that small group is representative. I would argue that that the French presidency should begin working on that now. Yes, we know that Poland is going to be hosting the next COP, and there are rumors that Peru is going to host the one after that, and then will come France. I would begin working immediately with those presidencies, with Poland and with Peru, if it is Peru, to ensure that you have consistency over 3 presidencies. There's also been the UN Secretary General who has announced that he wants to organize heads of state and government together. Another recommendation from my side would be to ensure that the French presidency is working in tandem with the UN Secretary General. And we saw that the diagram earlier on about the Sustainable Development Goals and 2 parallel processes. One was the process by the Secretary General, and the other was the process by the countries. That's a kiss of death. I think you need a single process. I would encourage the French presidency to develop a joint team with the UN Secretary General. The process there, I think, is the most important point. The first question was on how do you actually create positive incentives. Let me start facetiously. You know that the Kyoto Protocol is an international legally binding treaty. And then Canada decided to walk away from the Kyoto Protocol. So then I thought, what do? Do I call the UN police and shoot the Prime Minister? What do you do to enforce that? That's the cynical part of my answer, but it has a serious undertone, and the serious undertone is if you're going to create obligations that are meaningful and create obligations that you can make stick. I have seen a number of instances where incentive-based penalties have been quite effective. For example, we've had a couple of instances where European countries have not had their emission inventories in order, and as a consequence they were suspended from emissions trade. That really hurts. So then you get your house in order quickly. So what I mean by incentive-based penalties is, for example, to say, if you have not submitted your emission inventory, you are not allowed to participate in emissions trading. If you have not submitted your national action plan, you cannot get money from the Green Climate Fund. If you have not taken certain measures to demand standards from industry, you are not allowed access to clean technology provided through the international community. In other words,